everybody. Can you hear me? Is this working? Yeah, it is. I have a loud voice, so it doesn't matter if it's not working. Welcome today. I'm so glad to have you all here. I know it's the last panel of the day, so hopefully we will keep you awake with some interesting facts and stories from these panelists here today. So just to give you guys a little bit of background, in the past few years, we've seen the traditional model of fashion retailing really being turned on its head. You've got the buying calendar being completely switched around with see now, buy now. Direct-to-consumer models have taken over. Online is booming, and with that, you've got new marketplaces, you've got social networks involved, and of course, you know, the way people are consuming clothes, not just sustainable clothes, is completely changing. A few statistics, though, about sustainable fashion. Globally, 75% of consumers think sustainability is extremely or very important, which is good news. In Hong Kong specifically, 16% are concerned to a large extent, and 62% are concerned to a certain extent about fashion's environmental wastage. And also, when we're talking about the millennials, because that's really the future, 9 in 10 Gen Z consumers believe companies have a major responsibility to focus on and address environmental and social issues. So we do know that people care, which is awesome. But today we want to talk about how sustainable fashion brands in particular, you know, because they're smaller, they have additional constraints, price challenges, how they are leveraging different sales and distribution channels to grow their businesses today, because it is hard in general as a fashion brand, let alone a sustainable fashion brand. So we've got a great panel of speakers here today. Actually, I would love for each of you to just introduce yourself to the audience and tell them a bit about what you do. Lorenzo, maybe you can start. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for having us.
Pleasure.
Great to be here. And I'm Lorenzo, co-founder at Lablaco with Yoon, which is also in the audience with us. And we're building actually a circular fashion platform to enable not only brands but also consumers to naturally shift, I would say, to a circular fashion system. And what this means is that circularity is one of our core values and system that we provide. On the other side, I would say transparency is also really important. So we're actually leveraging blockchain to make this happen. And but we'll probably go more in detail afterwards. But
all right, Christina.
So I'm Christina. I'm the founder of Redress and the founder of the R Collective. And in a nutshell, I've been doing this for a long time, helping emerging designers, sustainable designers, to go from an idea to helping them develop brands for retail. So I've also founded a sustainable fashion brand, which Michelle's going to be speaking on behalf of more. So really, I'm here on this panel much more top level to talk about the bigger trends than the smaller nitty-gritty.
Michelle.
Hi, I'm the marketing director at the R Collective and also an e-commerce consultant. And the R Collective is a social impact upcycled women's wear brand born from Redress. And we rescue luxury excess materials and reuse them by upcycling them into new collections.
And last but not least, Dorothy.
I'm Dorothy. I founded 22 Factory last year as an entrepreneurial venture under Cobalt Fashion. So Cobalt is one of the largest network groups in the world. So because of that, we have access to a lot of leftover yarns. So 22 Factory came in to leverage that and upcycle leftover yarns to make premium network collections to consumers at a fraction of price.
Great. Okay, any questions? No, I'm joking. It's my turn for the questions. Okay, great. So I think I just want to get a bit of an overview first. So I think my first question is, what are the big trends in sustainable fashion retailing? I mean, I don't know if they're different from regular fashion retailing. I mean, I can maybe start off with you, Christina, on this one.
Yeah, I'll start. I mean, Divya, you opened the panel talking about some good news about all these consumers who claim. And, we all know that we've been hearing about this forever. They claim, but do they actually do it? That's the big question. So the data on sustainable fashion purchases in terms of revenue is a bit like, stabbing in the dark, if that's a saying. We don't actually really know. However, the estimates suggest, according to Business of Fashion, it's 1% of the total women's wear is sustainable fashion. And then the Boston Consulting Group, they estimate it at 3% are sustainability champions, which I think is across apparel, not just women's wear. So if we think that maybe this is true, because number one, it's hard to define sustainable fashion. It's also very difficult to actually put a number on it. Yeah. So if we pretend that we agree with it, you can actually analyze that 1 to 3% of the total market, and you can actually whittle it down to the potential that the sustainable fashion market is worth between 7 and 21, is it a million or a billion? Oh, now you've really got me. I need to slight difference there. It must be billion, yeah.
Wow.
Because the total revenue of the global fashion industry is about 1.5 trillion. So there is certainly a supposed market for it.
Yeah.
And then the problem, I think, really with this, though, is that 97% of the profit of the fashion industry is owned by the top 20 companies. So the big guns out there are making 97% of the profit, which means that all the other industry is scrabbling around for 3%. So all those sustainable fashion brands are scrabbling around of a smaller piece of what is still a very big pie.
Yeah.
So I do think that it's definitely an opportunity to go after this 7 to 21 billion USD annual potential market, and it's obviously very, very difficult. But the cash is out there, and as we know, cash is king and consumer is queen, maybe, and the consumer wants it.
Yeah.
So I think it's good news.
But what model specifically have you noticed that sustainable brands are gravitating towards? I mean, maybe Lorenzo, something you can.
Well, I
shed some light
personally
on?
see a lot of upcycling new trendy brands, if you like to call them like that, which are those brands that are not, the classic hippie sustainable brands, which I think there's a lot of them, but I think that the high-end consumer is not so attracted. So we are very interested personally on the independent, I would say trendy, cool brands, and we see a lot of upcycling going on there, doing incredible work. Just one brand, for example, Marin Serre, they're doing the Green Line, which is, just talked to them actually yesterday, and a lot of their products is actually really upcycling already made garments and just make them into incredible garments. And if you think just also Off-White, they started upcycling, if not everyone knows, but
Oh, I didn't know that. Yeah.
the first collection, it wasn't even called Off-White yet, but Virgil actually took old polos and printed on stuff and sold them for double price.
Wow.
So it's an opportunity for business, but also to keep that kind of edge, I think is cool.
But I mean, actually, maybe Dorothy and Michelle can shed some light on this. How different is it to get a sustainable fashion brand to market compared with, a conventional brand or a conventional retail model?
I think although we see a lot of environmental conscious consumers nowadays, it's still very much a very niche market, sustainable fashion. So for us to get the fashion brands out there, it's very, very important to identify the right consumers.
Right.
And the good thing is, once you identify the right consumers, they could be very loyal. And I have this experience when there's one customer, she wanted to buy a product from us, and then she insisted to pick it up herself because she wanted to save the packaging and to not cause any pollution due to logistics and everything. So I think for sustainable brands, it's really important to find that niche segment.
Yeah. And what about for you, Michelle?
Well, I started my career actually in fast fashion, so I have quite a bit of experience in fast fashion. And obviously, when you're bringing a fast fashion brand to market, it's very much about driving the lowest prices, volume sales, buy it now. This is what the latest influencers are wearing, the latest pieces. Whereas sustainable fashion brands, you have to. You're under a lot more scrutiny, and people are really taking note of every single part, of every step of the brand, even from the shipping, the packaging, the whole supply chain. Like, consumers are really demanding transparency in the brand. So I think you have to be a lot more creative and a lot more thorough, I guess, as well in your brand story, and making sure that you're delivering and satisfying those needs from the consumer too.
It's quite interesting because a lot of sustainable brands tend to be online, and because that way you can discover the story easier at your own time as opposed to going into bricks and mortar. But I'm curious, do you think bricks and mortar is not a great outlet for sustainable brands? Or, I mean, is it still relevant for sustainable brands?
I think that there's kind of a need for both, to be honest, because I think it's important to consider the customer journey and consider the discovery phase, the research phase and the purchasing phase, and actually at every point, there's an opportunity to have that customer touch point. And having the physical offline presence is just as important as having online. Online is great for convenience and reaching a global audience, but offline really helps you to create those relationships with customers direct face-to-face and build those genuine relationships.
But Lorenzo, you were saying that you actually have built a community, but online. Can you tell us a bit about how that works?
For sure, yeah, but I would say that like you, I perfectly agree in the sense that we do also both online and offline, because the offline is almost as important, I would say, to the online, because even if the numbers are smaller, the roots are much deeper. And it's a little bit like, you can use phone calls, but you have to see people at the end of the day. So I think that you have to have both. But yeah, that's, for example, we try and create community doing fashion weeks with grouping people. So for example, we're also doing a summit actually in Paris to get people together, so consumers, but people in the industry, and everyone together to talk about the issues in the industry and how we can actually move forward. So I would say for us, the offline is not so consumer driven. It's more probably industry driven for our platform. But then the consumers are kind of a consequence of the good work that we do at the start, I think. So.
How different is it when you are dealing with the consumer like directly as opposed to doing it wholesale?
Well, our channels are classic social media. So, we have online now Instagram, which is the strongest one. And we really kind of work hard to create our content as best as possible. I think that's really important for us.
Christina, you work with a lot of young designers in the sustainable realm. How do you advise them when they do want to bring their brands to market? Do you tell them to go through the traditional wholesale models, or do you prefer direct-to-consumer? What have you seen them have the most success with?
Well, I mean, financially, obviously, direct-to-consumer is where the cash is, and that's what any startup business needs, access to capital, cash flow, et cetera. So, in an ideal world, we'd wave a magic wand and everyone would be direct-to-consumer, but it clearly doesn't actually happen that way. Partly, startup brands, they don't have marketing budgets to get the traffic to their site, so forget it. It ain't going to happen. It's just too difficult. And so, they're spending a lot of their time, effort on social media, bringing them to their website, but most people are going to multi-brand online shops anyway, so it's really, 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 really difficult. So I do think that, obviously, the financials, as I said, better for direct-to-consumer. I think wholesale does play a part, and going back to Michelle's point, I would say, there's a lot of misunderstanding and confusion about what sustainable fashion actually is, and so for people to be able to go and touch it and feel it and try it on and realize that actually it's beautiful, et cetera, is very important. The key problem is that the wholesale margin is really bad for the brand, and I think really most startup brands would see any wholesale partnerships as marketing only. But that said, if you look at some of the big global retailers that have done collabs with upcycling designers or sustainable designers, whatever we're going to call them, Galeries Lafayette, Lane Crawford, Bloomingdale's, Selfridges, these are the big guns who are actually getting behind the next gen, these sustainable designers, and they're doing it because I can't speak for them all, but my interpretation of why they do it is because they understand that the consumer wants it, and ultimately, for them, it's marketing as well. They just want to look good and have new foot traffic come through their door to get people off their online shopping and into their store. So they do these interesting collaborations. And it's a little bit frustrating for me that it falls under a marketing type of sort of objective rather than a commercial objective. But I still think that startup brands should milk it as much as they can.
Well, Dorothy, your brand is relatively new. You do direct to consumer. Do you think wholesale would completely change the business for you?
So we actually have quite a few channels. Most of it we have direct to consumers, but we actually did some pop-ups as well, and we also tried wholesale before as well. So I think each of these channels, they actually has its own unique role, and touch and feel is very important. And also a pop-up or a wholesale store, the good thing about it is it's a good touch point to acquire new customers. And once they get to know you, they can go online to check out more. But I think that's a very important first step for a lot of new customers for a new brand.
Well, there's also a lot of creative ways that you can sell fashion, especially in the digital space. And you've got like kind of the rentals, subscriptions, resale sites. I mean, actually, Lorenzo, yours is quite interesting because you've also got the blockchain element incorporated. Can you tell us a bit more about how that works?
Sure. So actually, when we talk as the model itself is more of a circular model, in the sense that usually any e-commerce you buy, consume, and throw away, there's no system of putting back the stuff where you bought it. So we actually provide the customer and the brands with the tools to kind of shift to a closed loop. And we do that very simply in a sense. So from a consumer point of view, for example, you can log in the app that we have, Lablaco, and you just take a photo of the clothes you don't need in your wardrobe. So we kind of help the consumer to lower the fashion waste. And what happens is that either brands or other consumers can order your product for free. So you cannot sell, you can only donate. And then you receive an impact calculation. So how much water, how much CO2 is involved in the production of this piece. We give you an estimate based on category. So you actually know, that you're doing something good. And then based on your impact, we provide you with discounts, which you can then use to buy. We don't call it sustainable fashion, we call it impact design. Which means basically, collections that have a positive impact. So either socially or environmentally, there are many different, I would say, touch points of sustainability that we encounter. And what we use the blockchain for is basically to trace the unique product history timeline, if you want.
Okay.
So we
From
can
when
do
it's production or?
Exactly. So we can do it in different levels. So we do it either at the production level or at the distribution level, but we can also do it at the post-purchase level. But at least the next owner will know that. And seen as it's an actual community-based application, very similar to Instagram. So basically, when you buy an item, you'll have your username on the blockchain in the history of the product. So you can actually see, the factory name. You can click on it, see where it is.
Celebrity that wore it.
You can see, you can see then the brand, maybe the retailer, and then when you buy, your username is going to be, fixed in the blockchain. So, and then if you give it to someone else, you have a second owner and a third owner. So you keep the history of the product going.
I mean, the circular model is great because you have lower wastage and such. But is there actually profitability in it? This is something for all of you.
Absolutely. I mean, this is not zero. It's I would say value stuff. You can actually. We've already done some examples of I would say crowdsourcing materials for upcycling collections with our platform. So, for example. There's Skim London, which is a luxury brand in London, which does, I would say, ethical leather clothing. And also Arizona Muse is now promoting them. They're doing an awesome job. And basically with us, they crowdsourced denim jeans, which is the worst, kind of impact, if you like. Yes. So they basically crowdsource in a campaign called My 22 Jeans. So they just needed 22 pairs of jeans to upcycle in a special capsule collection, which was, extremely high-end. And so they did that through us. So, all the community was involved in upcycling together to create something new out of it. So this is one example of how, upcycling can be positive and also a business.
Yeah, but
Christina,
can I jump
you're
in
a
on
fan
that?
of this.
I've got something to say. There's a really good report. Anyone who's really interested in the kind of economic model of the circular economy around rental, subscription, or re-commerce should definitely, it's actually quite an easy report to read, so I'd suggest it. I've forgotten what it's called, but you need to look up Accenture with Fashion for Good. It came out in about May this year. And Accenture did a study on circular business models, looking obviously at the profitability of it. And the one thing that really struck me, that's so simple, but actually it really kind of nailed something home when I read it, which is the beauty of the circular fashion, so rental, subscription, and re-commerce, is that it decouples growth from extraction of raw materials. Because you can have a successful business financially that is not dependent on natural resources, and I really like that. Just as a very simple. That's why we, the circular business.
Yeah, it's better than organic materials. Yeah.
Because these, people are making money out of just keeping clothes going around in loops. So that's fantastic. So the point is, if you're interested in that model, definitely look at the research. But the highlight of it is that there is definitely a business case for good profitability on re-commerce within the luxury market, which basically re-commerce means a brand taking back its own product and then selling it again. Yeah.
Actually, yeah, this is really interesting because it's the reason why we're here in Hong Kong. We're doing exactly this with the Lynn Crawford Joyce Group, where we are actually another example of the Take Back program, not only for upcycling, because a retailer is not a brand. They cannot upcycle, they cannot create new stuff. So basically, they're doing exactly this. So they are regaining all the luxury items from the top diamond clients. They're tokenizing them on our system with the blockchain, and then they're reselling them in their stores to new customers, and the money actually goes for positive impact startups.
Yeah.
So that's one example, as you were saying, of re-commerce, which I think, again, is on spot, because otherwise people throw away or they give it, we don't know where it ends up.
So we've spoken a lot about sorry, did you have something to
I
add,
just have one
Christina?
really fascinating number. Rent the Runway, which is obviously the most famous rental company, is valued at $1 billion.
Oh, wow.
I mean, that's quite optimistic, isn't it?
How many years have they been in business?
Oh, I don't know.
12.
Is it about 12? Yeah.
Wow, that's quite cool.
It's really good. And by the way, Y Closet, which is the big one for China, they have 20 million registered users, 500,000 of which are regular, and every month they rent out 2 million garments.
Yeah, it just makes sense, right?
I got married in a rental, so
Yeah.
that's fine.
So we've talked a lot about direct to consumer, but what about business to business? How is technology helping sustainable fashion brands get to market? And I think, Michelle, you probably know about digital showrooms, right? Something you've used.
Yeah, we're actually launching on Ord, so that's a new digital showroom platform, and that has really amazing, innovative technology, which enables buyers to view collections using virtual reality, and using 360 photography as well. So they also have a showroom app. So it enables buyers to, skip flying around from all around the world, and actually makes it much more efficient as well. So it increases operational efficiency, reduces cost for both ends, for brands and for buyers. And it's a fantastic platform which is really leveraging the new technology and bringing, the collections in your own space with VR and with 360-degree photography.
Dorothy, have you come across or researched any B2B tools that maybe could help you online for your brand?
Actually, just a few days ago, we launched a B2B piece on our website. So it's for fashion brands. If you want to do some sustainable knitwear, all you have to do is go online, and we have this product configurator tool which you can customize your own designs, and then you just submit, and we can do sampling and also a very small batch production for you. The MOQ is just 50 pieces per style. So we think that with this, what we want to drive within the fashion industry is to solve the overproduction problem, because a lot of environmental pollutions from fashion industry actually comes from inventories. So by this small batch production, we hope to reduce the need for inventories for fashion brands.
So we talked a lot about online. What do you guys think the impact is going to be of this growth of buying online? I mean, both through digital showrooms, direct-to-consumer models.
Well, I have a bit of a view on that, actually, which is, and I'm not an expert on this at all, but I've heard more and more people talking about it, and perhaps you all know about it already, but with so many fashion purchases being done by the consumer online and also even by the buyer in a wholesale account online, what it's actually doing is it's just making people buy something from 2D on their screen, and they've got no idea of the quality of the product. So actually, whereas, if you were buying something from a shop, the buyer of a wholesale physical shop, would be absolutely hell-bent on making sure that that product was really good quality and that it was going to look great on the rails, and that it was really well constructed. But now most people are buying online anyway, so quite honestly the quality of the products is dropping because the brands can get away with it.
I see, so that could be a problem.
It is a problem, already I do believe it's a problem.
Yeah. Do you have actually, because since you both retail online, customers asking a lot of questions about the quality, the look, the feel, because you can't actually a picture's a picture, but feeling it is completely different.
I think it's really important to try and leverage photography as much as possible in videography. So we do try to produce a lot more video content and take close-ups of all the products. It is difficult, to be honest, with selling online and making sure that you really show the quality of the materials. So we do try and make that really clear on the website, clear on social media and email marketing as well, and really help to describe to the consumer exactly what it is what the product is about, the product story as well, the whole journey of the product. I mean, for us, we're rescuing luxury excess materials, which relieves the pressure for virgin materials. So the impact as well is quite key in our messaging, as well as the product story. Yeah.
It's interesting because we're talking about a circular economy and recycling and such, but actually online in general, the business, the return rate is so high. So how do you isn't that counterintuitive then when you're selling sustainable fashion, but then you've got all these returns all the time?
Well, there's one way to help not get the returns,
which
make them pay for it.
Yeah. Nobody wants to pay for returns anymore these days.
Yeah, I mean, that's a big, I don't know the stats actually. I'm going to guess it's like 30-40% return rate.
Yeah,
I don't know if
it's high. It's sometimes above 50%, actually.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah.
Have you found that to be a problem sometimes?
I mean, for us at the Art Collective, we're quite lucky. We don't have that high of a return rate,
Okay.
but from previous experience, yes, I'd say average is 25 to 30% direct-to-consumer returns. So I think for us, we also do allow customers to come to our studio and try things on beforehand. So again, it goes back to that point of having an offline presence.
Yeah.
I think that does help for people to really understand what the fit is like, understand what the quality is like. And once you're familiar with the brand and you know what the product is like, then you become a lot more comfortable and know which product is right for you online.
I think as of now, is really a problem. But as time goes by, I believe technology would help because people return products because the products don't come as the way they expected. So with technology, maybe people can do made to measure or can utilize all those technologies like 3D scanning to make sure the products they buy actually fit them.
Yeah.
So hopefully this will change.
Help. Yeah, I think the 3D scanning is amazing, actually. It's very interesting. So I'm going to just open up to a few questions. If you guys want to submit a question, please do scan the QR code, and it's very technological. Even for me, I'm like, oh. So if you want, you can raise up your hand too. I don't mind. I'm very old school. The first question is why aren't sustainable brands using AR, VR technology to sell sustainable clothes? Yeah, I think that's the question, pretty much. As opposed to, a lot of brick and mortars use a lot of AR and VR, but why aren't sustainable brands using that technology online?
I mean, I think it's still quite new technology, I would say. So we have big brands like ASOS.com that have just recently launched AR where you can try things on at home. But if you kind of think about the scale of ASOS in comparison to, your small independent designer, there's definitely a big difference in the amount of, cash that you have to really invest in this kind of technology. So that's kind of what I think is really, why smaller sustainable brands aren't necessarily able to use that technology yet. And hopefully that will change over time and it will become a little bit more accessible. But right now I think it is very new.
Have any of you guys ever experienced that? Oh, sorry, please, Dorothy.
We aren't using AR, VR yet, but we've been utilizing virtual sampling capability, and so that B2B piece that I just talked about, we actually utilize that technology. You can the product that you see is a virtual sample, and we have this capability to have the yarn skin, and then to make these samples that look really real and in high resolution. So I think this is a small step that we're working towards that.
And just to add as well, that I think that sustainable fashion brands, obviously our priority really is actually making more sustainable products. We're upcycling excess materials, so the effort that goes into actually sourcing these materials for us, it's from leading luxury brands and mills manufacturers. So there's actually a huge amount involved already in actually sourcing those materials, making sure they're the best quality, and then actually designing into that as well. So we don't make any new virgin materials. Traditionally, designers will say, I want X, Y, Z, design this fabric for me with, it needs to be like this and prescribed, whereas we have to design into the waste. We're given these end of rolls, for example, and it might be 50 to 100 yards, whatever. we don't know the fabric width, and then we receive this material, and we have to design into this fabric width.
Yeah.
And so we actually managed to reduce our wastage at the pattern cutting stage to 1% or less, and traditionally it would be 15 to 20%.
Yeah.
So I think just in terms of an independent, smaller, sustainable brand, my point being basically our kind of priority at this stage is really, making the best practices in terms of sustainability first, and then AR, VR technology would be lovely.
Yeah.
But that maybe comes a little bit later on while we're trying to perfect and reduce, waste for us.
I mean, AI has actually been used quite interestingly for a lot. Like Ukes, for example, they've just released a collection that they've basically designed based on AI. So they basically got artificial intelligence and to find out what their consumer wanted in terms of the styles, how the fits. I mean, do you think that's something that could really help sustainable fashion designers too, to create clothes that are actually more meaningful and relatable and that consumers want to wear?
Yeah, I think that's a good...
that's where you could incorporate it in, right?
I don't really believe in AR, VR at the moment.
But that's needed for the whole industry.
Yeah.
Like, we've got to take that out of the sustainable little, area, because we need that for inventory management, where, we all know the problems of that. Mismatch of what consumers want. They want this, they want that. We need all that data and to be able to react to that much quicker.
Yeah. Okay, one more question. Sorry. There's a new trend that brands can rent clothing with a certain monthly fee for 3 pieces per month. Then the consumer can return it. Mm-hmm. How do you like this idea? Do you think this is a circular, sustainable model?
That's a harsh one, because actually I just saw an article saying that this kind of rental is actually worse.
Why is that?
Because you have so much dry cleaning, you have so much deliveries, it's much better just to buy it, keep it in your home, and just use it in your home.
Right.
So actually, they are starting to realize. I saw an article, BOF as usual. So basically, that says that it's okay when you're talking about special event renting. Yeah. So I think that's awesome.
Yeah, because it's very specific.
That's specific. But if you're talking about changing your wardrobe weekly and daily through rental, that's a huge resource amount of involved.
Yeah.
So it's always tricky.
Yeah.
But what do we make of that then? Because that's so confusing. I mean, I know that BOF thing came up.
It is, because you think that's being sustainable. I think, okay, great, if I'm renting something, then I'm being sustainable.
Yeah. Well, the biggest dry cleaning business in New York is Rent the Runway.
Oh. Yeah. They're using the $1 billion to pay for the dry cleaning.
Yeah. I don't know, but what do we do about that? You get this conflict, and some journalist has written this piece, and maybe it's true if you are doing a subscription service and you live in Timbuktu and the company's in New York, and then they're shipping. Like, I don't know the scope of what this article was, but it's just really depressing when you find a good model and then, someone poo-poos it.
Yeah, it's tough. Well, it's funny because I just got an email.
I
just got an email from a retailer in New York, and they're a size-inclusive retailer, and it says, if you buy something from this new collection we have, if your size changes within a year, you can send it back and we'll send you a new one in your size. And they were promoting it as, being sustainable and such, but actually that's kind of crazy because they probably have more waste. But then they were also saying that they're going to donate the clothes to, like organizations that need it. I mean, what do you guys think about things like that? I mean, would you ever...
any organization needs more clothes.
Yeah.
Well, half the time I try to donate, they don't want my clothes. Except for Christina does.
We've produced enough clothes to dress 4 generations of the entire human species.
Yeah,
it's billions of pieces.
But that's what makes a sustainable fashion brand, makes their job much harder, because we do have so much already.
Yeah, but then you could say, there is data, if you want to believe it, that suggests that the resale market for luxury resale will outpace the first-hand luxury market.
Yeah.
So whilst we have way too much stuff, at least we've got a promising resale market to keep it in use. Because, of course, you can't deny the fact that people do want to buy, use, find, consume new clothes. So we can't, bury our heads in the sand. That is the truth.
Yeah, that's true. Actually, Lorenzo, I'm curious, you sell a whole bunch of different brands. Do people gravitate more towards the high-end sustainable brands versus the mass market ones? They do.
Yeah, I mean, it's of course it's more expensive to create a proper garment. So I think for sure, when we're talking about cheap, sustainable, it's already a bit dodgy. It's a bit difficult to make it. I used to be a tailor personally. So I used to make, clothes by hand and all that, classic bespoke tailoring.
Yeah.
So, it used to take me a month to create a jacket. So, that was, how much effort is used,
But I mean, when you're upcycling clothes, it may not take as much effort when you're using a factory machine, but then the thought process behind it is what's expensive. That's the tough part. Do you find it quite hard to explain that to the consumer when you're upcycling and you know how to justify a cost? What's your price point like for our collective, out of curiosity?
It's between $90 and $500.
And for yours?
For winter clothes, it's about $800 to $1,500 for somewhere. Yeah.
So that's quite reasonable, actually. Do you find that they question the price?
I think what we do is we focus on really telling our story and what our mission is, and I think people really connect well with that story. At the end of the day, our mission is to reduce textile waste and reduce pollution created by the fashion industry. So we are obviously targeting a certain type of conscious consumer, and we also do make a lot of effort in communicating the product story as well, how everything's been made. We've created videos to kind of explain that journey. How we do everything, why we're doing it. So I think that helps people to understand more about the process behind it.
Yeah. Curiously, how much of the story does a consumer really need to know? I mean, you go to a website, it says, oh, we sell sustainable fashion. Sometimes that's enough for the consumer. I'm curious, especially because you all sell sustainable fashion, and Christina, I mean, you work with sustainable designers. Is telling the story that important as it was in the beginning?
Well, I think it's really important. And sometimes the message itself is more important than the products. And I think one good example is Reformation, a LA-based brand. Yeah. They even have a ref scale to measure the environmental impact of each product. So I think for those really conscious consumers, the story and how the clothes are made, the processes, the materials is really important for them. And that's why we write a lot of blogs to educate customers about this. And I'm sure a lot of people outside the fashion industry, they don't really know what's the impact and the long-standing processes of fashion development and fashion manufacturing. So I think it's really important for us to tell that story.
Yeah, but in how much depth is my question?
I think there's always going to be some consumers that don't really care.
Yeah.
As long as it looks great.
They care, but they don't care enough.
Yeah. So there's always going to be those consumers, and there are going to be consumers that really do care and they really want to read about the story. So you do kind of need to cater to both needs at the end of the day. Yeah. And actually, going back to Reformation, what I noticed is they have put less emphasis on ref scale. So I think this is just my speculation really, but as they've grown much bigger, maybe they're more mainstream and there's less emphasis on that, from a product page level that is, but they do have tons of information about what else they do. So I think for us at the R Collective, we do make sure that information is represented on the website, and we have all the information about how we source our materials and why we're doing what we're doing, so that at the end of the day, if a customer wants to explore and learn more, they have that opportunity on the website. And if you don't, then fine, you can just go to the product page and look at the products.
Well, we're talking about direct to consumer, but what if you want to go to a wholesale partner? I mean, is it important for you guys as creators for the wholesale partner to tell the story or not? Does that affect who you work with?
I think it definitely does, because at the end of the day, the wholesaler is going to represent your brand as well. So they definitely need to understand your brand and why you're doing what you're doing and how you do it as well, because they need to communicate it to their customers too.
Yeah, and I'd like to butt in on that one because, I've seen them countless times with the alumni brands or just startup brands that I'm aware of throughout the whole industry that have had wholesale accounts, and then a retailer has just completely miscommunicated the core essence of their brand. Maybe not, it's like slight exaggeration, not the core essence, but have really kind of gone off on brand story. And that's obviously when you're a purpose-driven business where, that's kind of key, quite fundamental that message is told correctly.
Yeah, absolutely. But I mean, in general, we're talking about sustainable brands, but is there really that much of a difference in the challenges that you face, when compared to a, conventional fashion brand? Do you have that many more obstacles, you think?
Who's going to go?
I'd say it's similar challenges. If you're looking from a startup, an SME,
right.
It's always going to be difficult to balance, like, are we doing wholesale, are we direct to consumer? And you kind of have to find that balance, really. So I think you just have to be very creative in delivering your product to all these different channels. You kind of need to be available and everywhere to increase your brand exposure. So I think the challenges are similar for startups, for small designers. But I think it's in terms of delivering the message as you're a large-scale fast fashion retailer, for example, as going back to my first point, it's based on impulse purchases. So the marketing messages and the way that you position your brand is going to be completely different. And maybe there is a slight less obstacle maybe to convert sales. And then if you're a luxury brand like us, then it's more important for us to communicate our brand story and explain why we're doing what we're doing as well, because we need to communicate that and kind of explain more about how we're doing it. So
for me, I think it's just two main cores. I mean, one is content. There has to be great content. It has to be kind of engaging and kind of hit the taste of your customer. I think that's really important.
Yeah.
And then on the other side, technology can help on the background. So you see an inspiration, you're kind of attracted to buy. And then at the checkout page, as we were saying, I think that's really important to have clean information and reliable information. And I would say the provenance is really important, the impact is really important, but then, as you were saying, how much information. So that's it. I don't think you need more.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, you just need a proper system that works.
A seamless system.
Exactly. It's like, we used to go on steam engines, now we're on electric trains.
Yeah.
We'll be, you don't have to convince the consumer once the system is better.
Yeah.
That sort of thing is, I think it's going to be a natural progress
Right.
towards a better system.
So we're going to wrap up soon. So is there any questions from the audience before I get into my final question? Yes, please. I know, I felt very sad nobody was asking more questions, so please. Okay, please.
Yeah, so we work with luxury brands, mills and manufacturers, and we are given these end of rolls. And we have to basically sift through and kind of source these different fabrics. And we do want to create these beautiful creative collections as well. So it's kind of trying to solve that creative problem. So our creative director is Denise Ho, and she kind of leads that design process. We have we build our own in-house collections, and we also have our designer collaborations. And so we have to kind of review the fabrics, select what we can. We do have to go through the process of understanding like how much yardage is available as well, because of course that impacts like what we can design into, how many units we can create. And then once we've kind of made that selection and we make this cohesive creative story, then we also need to design into the fabric width, as I mentioned before. So we want to try and minimize our fabric wastage as well. So that comes down to, again, solving these design problems creatively, still making something like a beautiful silhouette, but then how do we reduce that wastage? So I mentioned before the traditional pattern cutting fabric wastage is around 15 to 20%. But for us, we managed to reduce that to 1% or less. And we do that by kind of laying out the fabric width and then literally designing into that. So, our in-house design team kind of do that whole creative process and magic up these beautiful collections.
Mm-hmm. Anybody else? Any other questions? I asked them all for you. I did my job well then, right? Okay, finally. Okay, last question for all of you, actually. What are the future opportunities in sustainable fashion retailing, do you feel?
To make it real. I think that's the main point.
Okay, Christina?
I think that's a bit of a blurred line because I think this panel, we've spoken so much about what feels like independent, small startups. That's been like quite a tone of this panel. But I think that there's a scope for lifting off this definition of sustainable fashion retailing with the rise of made to measure and sort of made to order. So really reacting to customers' demands so that we are making what literally somebody wants. And so that will move us into a more sustainable fashion retail world, whether or not the actual product is made of organic blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
So there's going to be a blurring of what actually sustainable fashion retailing actually is.
Yeah, that's
in my
quite
mind.
cool. Yeah. Michelle?
I think there's definitely a demand from the consumer on transparency and kind of related to blockchain technology and being able to see, being able to trace back the steps and the processes of making a garment as well, I think is probably the future as well. So even being able to trace back the raw materials and through to the workers' happiness even. For example, there is another startup working on blockchain technology actually revealing the workers' happiness and in the supply chain, which I think is fascinating as well.
How do you know a worker's happiness? They take a survey, I presume.
I think I can't really speak for her, but she's created an app where it monitors, the workers can log in and actually
Really?
That's monitor
hilarious.
the happiness and satisfaction of the worker. So I think that's really interesting.
Yeah,
That's obviously not mainstream at this point, so maybe that could be something for the future of sustainable fashion as well.
Dorothy?
I believe there will be a greater awakening to turn sustainability from a niche market to more of a core in fashion. And currently the retail landscape is pretty scattered. Every small sustainable brand is trying to do their own thing, but there is already sign that, like for example, Net-a-Porter has launched Net Sustain, a one-stop shop solution for consumers who want to buy sustainable clothing. So I think when these community grows, there would be more joint forces that would make the community grow even bigger, and the brands would be easier when they want to launch the product.
Yeah. It's an exciting space to be in, I think, and I think as it grows, there'll be more room for innovation, and that's something that everybody can benefit from, right? All right, thank you. Oh, you have one more question, please.
This question.
Absolutely, go for it.
Actually, we are working on a project in Cambodia as well for sustainable fashion, and we're trying to have this modern ethnic combination to keep the heritage alive and make it a bit more modern and bring it to the German market. So I see the challenge, or what I'm always struggling with, is like this fast fashion and the slow fashion. So you design things, and you also just mentioned, Christina, that we have to bring something what people want. But that's also a challenge because people want what's a trend, and the trend changes quickly. So if you design things which, I mean, this is a difficult question, I know, but if you design stuff which is made for people what they just want at that moment, it's very trend-based, the colors, whatsoever, could be. Or do you try to actually make something appealing, but it's more long-lasting, and people don't want to give it away for recycling, just have it in the closet for long term? You get,
Well, I mean, I'm going to say something, I don't know, I'm sorry if it answers your question, but for me, made to measure is not really a trend-driven model of consumption. For me, made to measure is more like getting quality staples that really fit your body, that you've thought quite hard about, and you really think, this is my, you've gone to a 3D scanner or you've had yourself measured. So I wouldn't assume, and please help to correct me if I'm wrong, that for me, made to measure is not trendy. If I want to shop trendy, I go to obviously all of the fast fashion brands and the layer of even ultra cheap fashion brands online. So for me, made to measure doesn't drive trends.
But also your question was about whether consumers actually want slow fashion or if they want trend-driven fashion. Am I correct? Is that
kind of that's the question. Like, how can we actually bring it to the market? How really scale it up? Because made to measure, different pricing, some people looking for the stories and they're buying it. It's still a niche market, but we have to, how can we make it more mass market? I know it's not a nice word to say. How can we make sustainable fashion more to mass market, but we want to scale it so people are actually more aware and say like, okay, net sustain, like I actually want to have sustainable products. It's something which is, okay, this is a common thing to buy sustainable products.
Well, I'd say that sustainable fashion is trendy, actually. It's kind of trending. And I think slow fashion in itself is kind of a trend, I guess.
Well, it's been around
kind of
for so
coin
long,
it as a
really,
trend.
yeah.
So I think there's definitely a rise of slow fashion. More and more people are adopting this. There's a blurring of seasonality, like seasonal collections, and people are dropping the idea of seasons actually completely, and they want to focus more on slow fashion. So I think that is actually a growing market. It just depends on who your target consumer is at the end of the day. Who do you want to target? Because there is a target consumer base out there that appreciates and wants to buy into slow fashion. But do you want to target them, or do you want to target your fast fashion buyers? Because I think that slow fashion maybe is not mass at this point, but I think it is heading in the right direction, and I think it is growing actually.
I think it's a little bit like you were saying. I think you identify slow fashion a little bit, like I was saying before, the little hippie brand, right? That is doing everything really nicely, but it's a bit boring. I think there's a lot of interesting brands out there creating sustainable or impact, if you want, design collections. And H&M is actually also an example of this. I mean, they're actually doing a special sustainable collection with certified fabrics, produced in a different way, with special designers like Angel Chen in China. And she's a super trendy designer, for example. So, but also other, which are not fast fashion brands, are shifting to sustainably made products. So when we think about sustainable fashion, I think it's just going to be how fashion is going to be made in the next 10 years. So I don't think it's going to be isolated to the boring brands, if you want. Yeah.
Everybody will be doing it, hopefully.
Yeah, it's just a new way. It's like transportation. Tesla is an awesome car, not because anything, but it's just you're naturally attracted to it. But then it's an awesome car. It's electric. It has AI. So I think if you're creating something new now, it has to have sustainability just as a basic. Like everything has AI now. Everything has to be sustainable. Everything has to be made in a different way. So.
I hope that answered your question. All right, well, thank you all for being here. Thank you all to my amazing panelists and to the Fashion Summit for having us.
Thank you so much, Divia, and all the panelists.